بالنسبة لل HTTP it's an application layer protocol. As any other protocol, we need to specify three things: the syntax, semantics, and timing. Now, when we talk about the syntax for HTTP, basically we need to see the format of HTTP messages. As we have said before, there are two types of HTTP messages: HTTP request and HTTP response. Now, for the HTTP request, here is an example for an HTTP request. As you can see, the HTTP request message consists of several lines. The first line is the request line. Now, in the request line, we have the method. In this example, it's get. There are different methods. It could be get, post, head. Also, we have delete and put. Now, next to the method, we have, as we can see here, the URL. So the method space URL space HTTP version. In the example here, it's HTTP version 1.1. Then we end the first line, which is the request line, by carriage return and line feed. So basically enter and line feed to move to the next line. Now, next is the second part of the HTTP request message, which is the header lines. Now, we have several header lines in this example. As you can see here, the first header line is basically the host, which is the server. And then we have the user agent, which is basically the browser we are using, in this example Firefox 3.6. Also, we have other header lines. These are basically used to negotiate the properties of the object we are requesting. For example, the format of the object, the type of the object, and so on. Also, in this example here, we have the connection type keep alive, which means what? This is a persistent HTTP connection, which means when we receive the object, we are asking the server to keep the TCP connection open so that we can use it to send requests for other TCP connections. Then the body of the third part of the HTTP message, request message, is the entity body, which could be empty for some methods. For example, for the get method, it's empty. For the head method, it's empty. For post and put, actually it has data. So the post method is basically used to whenever we have a form to fill. So, for example, in some websites, you need to fill a form with some information, could be your personal information. The post method could be used. Now, there is another way also to upload a form other than the post method, which is using the get method. So basically here with the get method, basically you are going to send your information, which is basically what you have filled in the form, as part of the get HTTP request message. And for example, and you can see this in this example here. So this is basically some website, the URL for some website, and as you can see here, we are doing search, and monkeys and banana, which is basically the parameters we are typing in the form are sent as part of the URL in the get message. Now, as we have said, there are different methods: get, post, head. Now the head is similar to the get. The only difference is that with the head, we are asking the server to send us a response without including the object itself. This is used for testing and debugging. In HTTP 1.1, the methods are get, post, head, and also we have put, and the put method is used to upload a file to the server. The delete is used to delete a file specified by a URL from the server. Okay, now for the response message, here is an example of a response message. In the response message, the response message consists of three parts: the status line. So basically, this is the status of the response. This line starts with HTTP version, in this example, version 1.1, and the status code is 200 OK, which means that the request will be the response. There will be a response for the request. Now this is the date for the response. This is the server. Last modified, it means when the object that we are sending in the response was last modified or updated. Also here, keep alive, the connection is persistent, and timeout 10, which means this is the timeout interval, which means if the timeout interval expires, the termination will be closed. Connection keep alive, and then we have the data, which is the actual file or object that is sent in the response. Now these are different status codes. 200 OK, as in the previous example, which means the request succeeded and the object will be sent in this message. 301 moved permanently, which means the object doesn't exist in the location specified in the request message anymore. It's moved to another location which is specified as part of the response message. Bad request, it means the server doesn't understand the request. Not found for not found, it means the requested object is not found. The server cannot find the object. HTTP version not supported is clear. Now here, this is an exercise where you can try HTTP by remotely logging into a server using Telnet. So this is the name of the server. Log into the server port 80, which is used for HTTP. It will open TCP connection to port 80, default for HTTP. Now anything typed will be sent to that port, to port 80. Now what are we going to type? Type get, which is the request message. Get, this is the object, and this is the host. And you need to wait for the response. Okay. Cookies. As we have said before, HTTP is stateless. It means it doesn't keep any state information about the client. If you send the request, the same request several times, the server is going to respond. It's not going to remember any of your previous requests. But with cookies, the server can keep some information about the client as part of cookies. Now, when you send an if cookies are supported, then when you send an HTTP request for the first time, the server is going to create an ID, a unique ID for the client, and it's going to store it in the database, in its own database. So this is a database that exists in the server. Now, any future request coming from the client is going to be connected to the ID, to the cookie ID that is stored in the database. And for example, here, let's say that a client already in the past visited eBay. So now in its it has a cookie with the ID 8734. Now let's say that the user visits Amazon server, so it will send HTTP request get message, for example, to the Amazon server. Amazon server receives a request from this client for the first time, so it will create a unique ID for that client and store it in its backend database, which is here, and then it's going to respond to the client, and it will send a response with a header line set cookie 1678. Now the client receives the response message, which is a normal response message, and it will store the cookie ID 1678 as part of the browser. Now in the next request message that is sent from the client, it will include the cookie 1678. So now the server, when it receives this request, it will send a response, and also it will include some it can perform some action which is specific to that user, because it recognizes that user from the ID that is included in the request. Also, if 1 week later, if the same client sent a request the request will have also the cookie ID 1678. Also the server will remember that client, and it will send a cookie specific response to that client. So what can we use cookies for? Now, sometimes when you visit a website for the second time, it can you feel that you are recognized. It will tell you, for example, if it is a website through which you can buy items, it will ask you if you are still interested in some items that you've already checked in your previous visit. Also, it will remind you to buy the items that are placed on your cart. So all of this is done through cookies. Also, as part of cookies, your personal information, if it was provided as part of a previous HTTP request, it can be stored as in the database, so you don't need to refill your personal information the second time you visit the website.